Record, my brother.
Hey Nick, my man, I'm sweating. It's summer, and have you seen this on the news? It's really hot.
Yeah. So my daughter's in Spain and whatever, it's 115 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Celsius, but it's crazy. Here's the thing. In the US, we have this thing. You may have heard of it. It's called air conditioning.
Yeah, we don't have that here. I was actually talking to a doctor, like a neighbor, and he's like, "Oh, I'm like, I'm going to work now," and he's like, "Oh, do you have aircon?" I was like, "I'm in a public institution. They don't know how to spell the word aircon." I was like, "But you're a doctor. Surely to treat patients, you have aircon." And then she just glanced at me with these empty eyes, like
No.
she doesn't have
Oh,
aircon either.
you can't do surgery in heat. Well,
Yeah,
whatever. All right. Hey, listen, dude, you know what? You texted me. You texted me a couple of things. So this is our last podcast of the season.
yeah.
And I think we should start. There are two things you texted me recently. One is our buddies Christoph and Lori have this podcast. So the AIS has decided to have an official podcast. So that's
That's
kind
right.
of
Not
nice,
not
right?
one of these ludicrous things that we're doing for 5 years, but now there's an official AIS
Yeah.
podcast, and our good friends Laurie and Christoph produced the first episode. And their idea is actually really nice. Like they're taking books. We talked about books and how no one writes books anymore. So they said, look, let's build a platform and talk about books that people have, that, IS
Hmm.
scholars have written about, which I think is a great idea. And they published the first episode, and it's an AIS official thing. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to find. It's not on Spotify or on,
Yeah.
Apple or wherever else people
It
go and
isn't?
listen to their
How
podcast.
did
No,
I
it's
find
not.
it?
I found it by coincidence. I was looking for something on the AI's web pages. Anyway, so when you log in as a member and then you go to some place, then you can find the podcast. And it's the official AIS podcast,
Oh, they should
and
make it
go listen
public.
to it.
Yeah, they should
Absolutely.
make it public. I think I got it from the link you sent. I was able to somehow get to the podcast from that. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. But AIS should definitely make that public. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
All right, and then the other thing you texted me were these guys. I'm missing their name, Raffaello, and
In Italy. Is it
yeah,
Vitali?
and
Vitali?
Vitali
Yeah.
Mendel. He did his PhD at Georgia State. He's at Virginia Tech now,
He's at
and then
Virginia Tech, and Rafa is at University of Sydney.
right, right. So here are a couple of guys, and they're scrappy. They're out there fighting. They're like, you know what? There's elitism, and we're going to call it. And they basically said there are conflicts. So they put this working paper. So it's not peer reviewed or anything. Um,
Yet. It is under
and
review, I think.
okay, but there is the one, and hopefully it gets published, and then
Yeah.
we could talk about it. But there is this issue that I have. I have a bone to pick with what do you call them, Rafaela?
Raffaella.
Rafaela has a bunch of recommendations on LinkedIn based on this study, and you know what I think about recommendations, right? We maybe be humble about our recommendations, but yeah, I think the beauty of what this guy's doing is, or what both of these guys are doing, is they're really trying to point out that there's this crazy elitism and that there's potentially a bunch of conflicts of interest. These editors accept each other's work and they
Yeah.
do it pretty regularly. And it's like, all right, is that something? So is that a conflict? So let's say record. Let's say you and I
Oh,
were not
wait.
friends.
Before you get into this, I want to hear what you have to say, but just give people some context. So I don't know about you, Nick, but this popped up in basically my LinkedIn bubble. When I open LinkedIn, I only get IS scholars and, whatever humble brags they're up to. And then I see this post and it created
Yeah.
a little bit of a stir. And then I actually had a whole bunch of email conversations in the background, like people saying, have you seen this, whatever else, and what should we do about it, etc. So these two guys, what they've done is they looked at they call it two elite business journals, but they happen to be two elite IS journals.
Well, they're probably too, there's no indication that it's MISQ ISR, but that was our guess, right? So,
Anyway, and they coded all the authors over I don't know, the last 10 years or something, and all the editors that handled their papers and all sorts of links that may exist between them. And then, to do a big analysis of whether and what kind of potential conflict of interest may exist between authors and editors, in elite IS journal publishing, which is, I guess, like it's a good thing to do, of course, if to run such an analysis. And then, they have analysis, they have some staggering findings, based on how they constructed everything, and then they have a bunch of recommendations, and this is where you come in, of course.
Yeah. So, and just to let you know, what they're basically saying is, and I think we should talk about their definitions of conflicts of interest, and maybe
Yeah.
we can have Recker's rule for what a conflict of interest is today. But what is it? Something like only 50 some authors, 54 total authors published more than 10 papers in these two journals in
Out
about
of about
14
what,
years.
5,000 IS people. So that's like
Yeah.
1%. That's the top 1% of scholars.
Yeah. And these guys have a conflict of interest in rate of ridiculous. It's like 53% or something like that based
Yeah,
on
and
their
that's,
measures of
yeah,
kind,
exactly. Like
right?
more than half of those, they claim have a some conflict of interest with I think the most being what they
The
call
editor.
reciprocal acceptance. So I'm an author, you're my editor, and in a different journal, a different point, you're the author and I'm your editor. And that's a
So
reciprocal acceptance.
yeah,
That's
so
what they
let's
say.
get
Yeah.
at what their definitions are, and then let's get at what you and I agree with and we disagree with. But let's just talk about that fundamental view of what you're just calling reciprocal acceptance.
Yeah.
Uh, that's let's say you and I are not friends necessarily, right? We have or there's no way to tell we're friends. We don't have a podcast together. We don't have any co-authored papers together. You're an editor. I'm an editor. I send you my work. You send me your work. I accept yours. You accept mine. That's reciprocal, right? So it's kind of like
That
this
is
quid pro
reciprocal.
quo. It's like if you accept mine, I'll accept yours is the implication. That if someone is accepting someone else's paper, the implication is that there's some conflict of interest because you're handling my paper, right?
Yes.
So that makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. Does it? I mean, like that would constitute a conflict of interest if, first of all, there is a conflict of interest, and second, if that conflict actually leads to some sort of skewing of, your impartiality, like if that actually favors into the
Yeah.
review process, right? So one of the things this paper has that made me do is like I wasn't aware of all the different types of conflict of interest, and I started looking at I keep spreadsheets of all my editorial work just so I keep track. I was like, ooh, do I have that in some instances? Like am I handling a paper by someone that has at some stage done whatever? And these reciprocal accept. I'm pretty sure that happened to me. I'm pretty sure. I can't name anything right now, but I'm pretty sure that I've handled a paper by someone who at some stage was an editor of one of my papers. It would be very unfathomable if it never existed in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. Could you think of any? Could you find any when you did that?
No, well, I have the story that popped into my head immediately. This is kind of like the opposite of that example. Is my first MISQ paper came out in 2011, like year or two after my PhD, and I was at UBC for a while at that point, like a year earlier, 2010 or so, because Andrew Burt Jones and Yair Wonder were there, which were kind of heroes for me. Anyway, so I go to UBC and I wanted to work with them. Except that Andrew was like, nah, I don't know, I don't have the time, and he was like really dismissive, and it attracted me. He's like, oh, my ideas are all shit, and he doesn't want to work with me. Why does he work with everybody else but not with me? Now in
Right.
2011, like a year after I came back, I realized, oh, he was the AE of my paper. And he never said that, but I'm pretty sure. I think he said that later. He said like he felt that he couldn't work with me because he was the AE on my paper, and I didn't know that because the AE author thingy is blind. So I really didn't know at that point. But the paper was still it was still in the rounds at some stage while I was at UBC, and I think that's why he said he couldn't be my co-author, which is why we only started working together like years later. Because
Yeah.
Andrew is very strict with these regards, and he wouldn't have what he thought could potentially be a perceived conflict of interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think too many people are quite as strong, which really gets me. If these two papers are, or if these two journals are MISQ and ISR, they're getting it right at Andrew's editor-in-chief role, and Andrew was really vigilant about that. I mean, I know stories
He
of
was,
him
yeah.
removing editors from papers where there was what he called a perceived conflict of interest. So
Happened to me as
it
well. Yep.
it's not even like you co-authored with the person or there was anything particularly reciprocal, but it would be like if someone co-authored with you. So this is the situation I know of, and I don't know if I should name names or anything, but I'll just use you as the example. I'll say like if since I have worked with you and you have worked with say somebody, I couldn't have that person, that somebody handle my paper because there's like a 1 degree removed. So Andrew would remove editors when he
Yeah.
thought there was 1 degree removed conflict of interest, right? So it's really surprising that this strong conflict of interest kind of increased under Andrew's term at MISQ, you know.
So, and again, let me share a story because that happened to me. So he removed me as an SE after the first round. So in when the revision came back, because of exactly this sort of like, I work with someone who has worked with that person, but the authors and me have never worked in any capacity, never chaired a track together, never nothing, nothing. But he still felt like because I had worked with the sort of intermediary, like someone that I worked with and we shared that it could look like that. So
Yeah.
and here's how the story continues. So I felt like I wasn't conflicted. And I said, look, if you feel this way, sure, but it is a downside because I've already handled the paper. And now we're switching the editorial team, which is never a good thing for anyone, really.
Yeah.
The authors didn't particularly like it, right? Because,
Yeah.
complete change in direction. We all know that it's a very subjective way that a person directs the papers. You and I are very different. Everybody else is very different. Anyway, so years later, like seriously, like 8 years later, ran into one of the authors and I was like, hey, whatever became of that paper, right? Because it was already
Hmm.
through the first round. I kind of liked it. I thought it was a clever, nice paper, good idea, brilliant data. Anyway, so he said, like, the new SE, well, went another round and got rejected. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, and this paper is still not out to this day. And I was like, well, that's not really a good outcome for what wasn't really, like, in my view, wasn't really a conflict of interest to begin with. So
Yeah.
who won in this
No, and
situation?
I've actually experienced the downside of protecting conflict of interest. There was a editor that was handling one of our papers. We were 3 rounds into it. There were 2 junior people on this paper, and then there was a potential conflict of interest because the editor moved institutions. So we were already 3 rounds into it. It was getting close. It looked like it was getting close. We got a new editor. New editor didn't like it, rejected it in the 4th round, right? So I've actually
Wow.
experienced that type of, and you've done it. You can, and I've experienced that situation a couple of times where conflict of interests emerge because people start working together, they move locations, they do things, and I've gotten the disadvantage. But I was thinking and I don't want to name names because there are a couple of situations that I thought of where I had accepted people's papers and they had accepted mine. So it's like, ooh, that would totally fit conflict of interest. The big
Yeah.
issue is that they don't see the rejections. So I hope it's not a problem. We talked about Anne Myshak and how she was my editor of my first Org Sci paper.
Yeah.
She was an editor at Organization Science for a while. And if you look, I accepted one of her papers at MISQ back, I don't know, 4 years ago or something like that. I think I was the AE and Andrew was the SE. But if you go back, so she accepted my paper in 2012 in Org Sci. I accepted hers with Andrew in 2021, 2022, somewhere around there. I was AE. And then recently, she accepted my paper again at MISQ. So one could say, well, she accepted my paper twice. I accepted her paper once. It's reciprocal. I can guarantee you this. In the meantime, in the intervening 12 years, there were at least 2 papers at Org Sci of mine that she rejected. And there was at least 1 paper at MISQ of hers that I rejected, right? So although on the surface, it looks like she accepted 2 of mine, I accepted 1 of hers, underneath the surface, no one sees the 3 rejections, the 1 of mine and the 2, or the 2 of mine and the 1 of. So I think that's the big flaw when I was reading this paper, and that's the key, I think, to understanding whether this reciprocity is actually happening in such a, because I think what I do is I pride myself on having some level of integrity, where when I get someone's paper, even if I like the person, because it's such a small field, especially senior people, you all know each other. So I like that, and there's certain people I really respect, and I know they do good work. Uh, I hold myself to not accepting their paper just because of the person. And I've rejected papers from people who I really respect.
Yeah, me
I,
too.
I
Yeah.
literally did one this weekend. There's someone I admire and look up to and was working with one of their PhD students.
But the paper was crap.
What's that? No, it wasn't crap. It just wasn't. And it was really clever. It had some clever things, but it had some fatal flaws to the point where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, these are fatal flaws. The AE and I literally went back and forth for a week saying, is there anything we can do? Like, does this have a path? Because the data was so interesting. So we're like, and then we just decided, you know what? No, we don't have any of these answers. We can't do it in the review process. I rejected their paper. This is someone so no one sees me rejecting people in this elite group. And this person, I guarantee, is in this elite group whose paper I rejected.
Yeah.
They see the positive. They see me getting a paper in, that person getting a paper in. Sometimes we might be each other's editors, although I don't know if this person was ever my editor. But they don't see the rejections. And I think that's the key to understanding integrity in this reciprocity. If there's some reciprocity, but there's a bunch of rejections underneath the surface, then, maybe people have integrity. If, however, there's a bunch of reciprocity and there are no rejections of elites to other elites, then yeah, I think we have a serious problem. So I think what we should do is do this study, but look at rejections as well.
I think rejection is a nice empirical indicator, right? This is a very econometric kind of like a very rigorous way of unearthing some of the, so ruling out alternative hypotheses. So I like it. It may be like it was certainly difficult for the authors to do this. So I'm not particularly surprised about the findings that they report.
But I'll tell you what I immediately thought, Wrecker, is we're such a small field. Who the hell can review my papers? Of the people who I trust, it's like my computationally intensive theory construction stuff.
Well, there's like 7 people, and they're all part of your group that's trying to push that. Yeah, you're all conflicted. I know this feeling, like in the early days in systems analysis and design. To this day, there are 2, 3, 4 people that could possibly be an editor. Like the most obvious one is Jeff Parsons.
Yeah,
Jeff Parsons he's the brilliant, he's the systems analysis and design guy. And he's not conflicted with me, and I'm not conflicted with him. And I'm pretty sure he's never actually tried to reach out and collaborate with me, or vice versa, because we can handle each other's papers. By the way, he has never, ever accepted a single goddamn paper of mine. Not ever, not once.
But if he does,
but that's literally the only person in this particular space that I'm not conflicted with. And it'd be even worse for him. He's worked with everyone, and it's only 10 people, right? So we're all conflicted.
Look at Kalle Luutinen, right? He's the Paul Adidas of our field. He has literally collaborated with everybody. And what's he going to do?
Well, you can send it to me because I'm not conflicted with him.
But I guarantee I bet you there's some maybe reciprocity. You've probably accepted one of his papers, and you probably accepted 3 of them in the last decade, right? There's association. He was my advisor. Right? Isn't there a conflict of interest if your good buddy and podcaster's advisor was Kalle? So
wait. Okay, let's get at this. So I'm saying I'm not conflicted with Kalle. I've never worked with him. I don't have any professional association. We never, chaired something. I've never chaired a Higgs track with him or anything like that. Never run a special issue. What else is there? Never been on a board. Never been even on a senior scholar thingy where a couple of people get together. Haven't done that. Don't have any professional ties. We've never worked in the same institution.
So wait, you're listing a bunch of things. So wait.
Well, I'm not conflicted with him. Like, just because I work with you and you happen to be his student, like, how is that a conflict of interest between me and him?
Well, I think, let's talk about that. But, Amani Albana.
Yeah, okay.
Her? So
I know the name, yeah.
She and I are running a track right now with Andrew Burton-Jones. Because we're going to, we're running a track at ISIS because somehow I got to run this track at ISIS. So I'm working with Amani. I've never worked with her before. I will never work with her after. I think, is that a conflict of interest now? If
as far as I know,
I run this ISIS track and then I get one of her papers, now I cannot handle her paper?
Really? I think so. Which is a huge problem. Because I think it is, but in my view, it shouldn't be.
So like Andrew, I can know I've never been conflicted with Andrew. Andrew has accepted one of my papers. I don't think I've ever gotten one of his papers. Maybe I have, I don't know. But and now that I'm doing this track with Andrew, I'm now conflicted with Andrew. He can't review mine.
I think that's exactly how it is. And I also think that's actually, it shouldn't be a conflict of interest. But as far as I know, that's a conflict of interest. Now, if you run a track with whomever at some conferences for something, you can't be an editor of the paper. Which again, it limits the space of possibilities to the point that you don't really have suitable editors left. I'll give you another example. No, first, I have a serious question.
So wait, let's conclude with the Kalle thing, right?
Okay.
Because here is something that I think it's kind of an indirect conflict. that I think, and if I could speak for Andrew, I think he, and maybe this isn't the exact formulation of that, but there are, I don't know, you could almost call them friend groups. Like, so for example, Young Jin Yu is my good friend. One of Young Jin's good friends is Ola Henfridson. So can I, and Ola and I have never collaborated.
Neither have I.
He's
Never
definitely
run a track
rejected.
together. Yeah.
He's definitely, at least he's rejected multiple of my papers, at least one that I can remember. Uh, but other than that, there's not a whole lot going on there, right? But I think Andrew would look at that like Nick and Ola are conflicted. We've never collaborated on a track. We've never collaborated on a paper. We've never done anything. But because we're both friends with Young Jin and we both go to this right, I think Andrew might look at that and go, "Oh, but you're part of the same group." So therefore,
So
Ola
wait,
and
am
Nick, we
I
can't
part
handle.
of the in that reasoning? Am I part of the case group? Because I don't feel
I
that
don't
way
know.
at all. I
You
don't think
might
so.
be.
We've never I've never worked with anyone except for Youngjin. Even you and I, like even you and I wouldn't handle your papers, but we are
Wait,
working together a
we
little bit.
have
But
multiple papers together now.
yeah,
We have a podcast for 5 years. We are
yeah,
conflicted, dude.
we are conflicted, but that's about it. Who else from the case group? I've never worked with Aaron. I've never worked with Color. I've never worked with I don't know who else is in that group to be honest. Like
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not part of
Aaron
that
Lindbergh,
group.
Kale. Well, Young Jin, you're writing papers with, so you're conflicted with him.
Yeah, but he's not Color's group. He's just Youngjin.
But think
Anyway,
about that. No, there's Young Jin and there's me. We are two fundamental pieces of Kale's
but
group,
there's
the
more. There's
Kale
James
Mafia.
Gaskin is there. I've never worked with him. Like
Well, yeah, but
I'm
I'm
not.
wondering, is that because you're kind of by extension part of the Lieutenant Mafia? That's what we call the case mafia or Lieutenant Mafia. It's all about Kale.
Well,
And
I on air I refuse to be part of that mafia. I'm not.
okay,
Really not in that.
but
Like
someone
I've never.
externally might infer it.
Yeah, fair enough. So, and I think that's what happening. By the way, my view on this is this has been the case of being recused as an editor because of exactly these situations, and I don't think it should have been. Like, because I don't
Yeah.
see the conflict of interest. I can handle Callus' paper. I'm not handling any of his papers, but I could, and I could handle Ola's papers, and I don't, but I could. See, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, I don't think. Well, you know, for as good as it does me, I don't think I would be conflicted in the sense that my judgment would be biased because of it. But I have a serious question, like because this is
Hmm.
one of the things I realized as I was reading this paper. So I'm handling a paper by one of the guys that would be one of the authors here, and I realized yesterday as I was uploading a revision of my own, oh, he's also handling one of my papers, and
Mhm.
this is temporarily really close. Like you could say this concurrently. Now that is a conflict of interest, isn't it? I didn't even realize.
Well, I don't know because I'm running into that situation right now where there is someone who has accepted a paper of mine recently, an editor, and I have that editor's paper. Now, I
Yeah.
rejected a paper from this same person
Yeah, I
who
have done that
accepted my
too.
paper,
Yeah, I've done the same
right? So
thing, and vice
in
versa
the
too.
last year, but then this person has another paper
Yeah,
where, and I frankly didn't think that this reciprocity was conflict of
same here.
interest. So he had published some of mine. I'm not sure if he had rejected any of mine. I have to think about it, but I rejected one of his even though he published mine. I didn't feel, I think I'm holding myself to integrity, to a stand where
So
I
do I,
look at
but
the
I think this
paper,
still constitutes
but
a conflict of interest. I
so I
think.
should not hand, so I have another paper by the same person. I've rejected one paper from this person earlier in the year, and now I'm in whatever second or third round or
Yeah, same
something
here. Basically,
with
same
another
situation.
very nice paper from this person. So you're saying I should recuse myself because they have handled my papers.
Like when I read this paper and then I looked up and it's like, is this? I didn't even know that is a conflict of interest, and then I googled it, and basically, it seems to be. Yeah, I didn't even know, so I'm thinking like, should I do something about it? Which means that should I, call the editor in chief and say like, hey, by the way, I just found out that this and this, I can't handle this paper anymore.
Well,
Is
the
that
editor
what
in
I'm?
chief is the one who assigns them.
What? How the hell is one person ever going to know of all these different possible conflicts? I don't blame her in this case. Like, how the hell is she going to know that? I didn't even know. No one, I bet you, like, it's really hard to keep track of these things. Like, all
Yeah.
these different potential and perceived and whatnot. How the hell? I don't even know that. We don't even agree on whether I can handle a paper by color. How the
No,
hell is
what's
she
the
going to know?
interesting thing is that you and I, as editors of a top journal, and now I've been editor for MISQ, senior for a couple of years, before that
Yeah.
AE, before that I was AE at ISAR, and I did not know about this. If someone handles my paper, I should not be handling theirs.
Yeah,
And if someone has ever
me
handled
neither.
my
Me
paper, I should
neither.
never handle theirs for the rest of my career? Or at
I
what
don't
point
know.
is, yeah. So what is the rule? So what is the rule? So what it's see, to me, it's like, and I get it. And here's the other issue with this is it's survivor bias. You're seeing the papers that were published. And I guess I keep going back to this. I see the inside where this whatever the food is getting made in the back of the kitchen. And my experience is this: I get 100 papers. I have to reject a bunch of them. Most of them I have to reject, and I don't care who the author is. It bums me out. Sometimes I get a new person, they have really cool data, and it's just like, oh, it pains me, but I'm just like, I can't be writing papers with people in the review process. So every once in a while, on rare occasions, I get all right, we can publish this paper. And then it's like we move it forward and go. Of all the rejections, there's a lot of senior people getting rejected
Oh
on
yeah,
my,
bloody
on
hell.
my,
We
you
just
know,
got two desk rejects in a row, you and me. It
As a
didn't
matter of
even take
fact, yeah,
three
we
days.
did. We got
Bam.
you and I got two desk rejects in a row just
Yeah.
recently. People don't see that. So it's like I see all my rejections. I get a ton of rejections all over the place. Sometimes I'm working with junior people. The junior people are doing their best work. I thought it was great. Boom, we get a rejection. We get a
Yeah, same
desk
happened.
rejection. We
Like,
get
yeah.
whatever. And it's like, so I see myself getting rejected a lot, disappointing junior people, always getting rejected. I see myself rejecting senior people,
Yeah.
senior people whose work I really admire, uh, senior people who have handled my papers in the past. So I see myself doing that. So I think that in my own experience, this process is working. People have integrity. All my shit gets rejected, and I'm rejecting a whole bunch of other people's papers. And every once in a while, some nice papers make it in.
Yeah.
But I think there's another side of this where maybe there is, and there probably is reciprocity, and there is that. And I think we should err on the side of, I don't know. I think Andrew's view would be err on the side of let's make sure
Caution.
appearances are there
Yeah.
of caution. But there is a counter argument. And I think the counter argument is, well, there are only certain people who can handle certain papers. And we have to trust the integrity. And if we're going to have top journals, the people who are senior editors at the top journals should have integrity. And we should look at their records. And are they indeed rejecting papers of people who are well known and people who maybe they have one of these? And if they are, then they have integrity and we can trust them. If they're not, well, then maybe we remove them from editorial boards.
Yeah, I agree. So I think I like your lesson very much because this is the one thing I'm also not taking offense with the paper. I think they've done a fairly nice job, but so like it lacks the attribution of agency in the sense of like, well, it matters what I do and whether or not I'm actually exercising, conflict or impartiality or, preference or all these sorts of things. It's me doing this. And you can, if you define conflict in some sense, yeah, sure. Then I'm pretty sure I was involved in a situation that you can label as conflict of interest. Do I personally think that I've ever unfavorably given someone an unfair advantage? I don't think so. And I'd like to see someone, show me the opposite. Like,
Yeah.
please, dare me, right? So, as I said, like, I'm pretty sure I'm right now in the situation of this, what they call reciprocal handling. I don't think I'm conflicted in the sense that
Yeah.
I don't think I am the object or the subject of unfair handling. As I said,
Yeah.
I've taken offense with saying like I can't handle these papers because something like why not? Yeah, I can send you many papers that I was rejected and that I've rejected, and I could even show the list of papers that I have accepted. We all know we've done this for what, like 10, 15 years now. There's a handful of papers we have to show for it. It's very few
Yeah.
of those. We don't have high acceptance rate, anything like this. So, and we run into all sorts of, we're creating a lot of issues because we can't find suitable editors anymore. I'll give you another example. So last week, as I said, you and I, we got a nice desk reject for 5 years of work and it took them 2 days to reject it. That's also
Yeah.
part of the story you never get to hear. I got a
Yeah.
paper with my doctoral student and another junior scholars, top journal and very good review process and just really rejected. Wasn't even borderline. It's just,
Yeah.
okay, tough to take. Let's move on. And I got it here, and this is the interesting bit. So finally, after again 3-4 years of work, got a paper accepted. Now this is a commentary paper, and this is a weird paper. But this paper, the key point of it, it has 12 authors who really we all collaborate in writing this commentary. Blah blah blah. It now got accepted after 4 years at MIS Quarterly. These are the author names, all of which I've never worked before in my life. Wai Fong Bo, Nigel Melville, Wolf Ketter, Shaila Miranda, Ning Nan, Brian Pentland. Oh, well, I have worked with him. Me, Supra, Shawn Isaka, Ping Wang, and a bunch of others. These are all editors.
Yeah.
And like after you got accepted, it's like, by the
So none of
way,
them can handle any of your
none
work
of them
ever
can ever
again.
handle
No.
my paper ever again.
Uh-huh.
Like this is
Yeah.
what it
No.
means, right? So this
Yeah.
is I just excluded, people whose work I've handled before, and they will now never be able to handle any of my papers ever again.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of people left.
No, that's an issue we have. It sounds like, well, we have 4,000 people in the IS field or something like that, 4 to 5,000. That's great. Of the 4 to 5,000, how many really know what they're doing? A lot of them are junior, a lot of them are mid-career, there's not that many that are productive and really know what they're doing. And what we have is look at your resume. Look at the young people you've worked with in the last 2 years. It's probably a dozen of them. There's like a dozen young people I've worked with. You look at people like Kale, he's worked with every young person in the field. What we are is a apprenticeship where the young people work with the older people, they figure out the game, and then some portion of them can play the game on their own. Others don't figure it out. So this is one of my issues. This is kind of an anti-elitism argument where it's like, wait a second, those, the Matthew effect, right? Those people who already get everything published are the ones getting things published. Well, there is a reason, and it's because they know what they're doing. Now, the senior people do know what they're doing a little better than, say, junior people. People in the US or in elite schools are trained a little better. That's why they're in elite schools. Or they have some angle. They're a little better methodologists. There's something better. That's why they get hired in elite schools. On average, the elites are better. Now, if the elites were no better, then we have a huge problem. The issue is that the elites are, in general, now there are great people among, say, non-elite institutions, and you and I can name them, and it's all great. But on average, the general tendency is that elite schools will have elite scholars, and elite scholars should produce more. Now, with that said, well, they work with young people. And then these young people have that, and some percentage of those young. So this whole idea of we need to democratize research, and we need to democratize the field. It's like, well, no, actually, we don't. We need to get people better, so that. And I haven't seen exclusion. As a matter of fact, I see the opposite. I see you, me, and a whole heck of a lot of others. I saw Amrit Tawana when I first tried to reject a paper of all Europeans. He comes into my office and goes, "Do we have to reject this?" Amrit, trained at Emory, working at Georgia. He's an elite, right? I am a junior faculty at Georgia, which is a really strong, arguably an elite IS.
Oh yeah, wonderful group.
And we're both at Georgia, so we're among the elites. And he would come into my office. People don't see this, being like, "Can we, what can we do with this paper to get it published?" Right? People want to publish stuff of junior authors. They want to publish, but they're not going to lower the criteria for them. And the bottom line is junior people from less elite institutions, frankly, are not as well trained. And I get a lot of their papers. They're missing the very fundamentals of inference. They're missing the very, the logical. They don't address the research, like the fundamentals of writing research papers. Every day, I have to edit papers that are missing very fundamental. As a matter of fact, the ones that aren't missing fundamentals, we have to reject a bunch of those. But so the bulk of them are just missing the very basic fundamentals. People don't see that side of it when they make these kind of anti-elitist arguments, is that, well, there's a lot of bad work out there. I don't want to say bad, but there's a lot of highly flawed work out there that doesn't belong in elite journals, right?
And that includes a lot of the work that, I don't know, like, I don't want to talk about you, but it's certainly a lot of the work that I do is not at that level. It's not. We don't even submit it there. Right. So we don't submit most of the stuff that I write it wasn't rejected at MISQ and ISR. It was just never submitted. It was straight away somewhere else because I felt like this is solid work and it's fine and it's good and it's all dandy. It's fine. Yeah. But this is not the same as Amrit's new paper or whatever. That's a good like, by the way, I just saw Amrit has a new paper out in ISR. I just glanced at it and just brilliant idea. He has
Mhm.
his data set has a couple of million entries or something.
Yeah.
It's one of these crazy pieces of work that he and Hani do. And like, oh, okay, let's just sure buy it for the next whatever
Yeah.
award. This is just a brilliant paper yet again. And I'm like, well, that's never gonna be me. I'm sorry, but it's just not.
And let's talk about those two guys, Amrit and Hani. I've worked with Hani on papers, and I've worked with Amrit as a colleague. Now, so first of all, I could never handle either of their papers, but I'll tell you this right now: they're brilliant,
They're
and they're
brilliant.
more
Yeah.
and they're more brilliant than me, and they're more brilliant than most people in the field. And the fact is, when they write work, when they do stuff, yeah, it's really good. So it's not because of some sort of reciprocity or some sort of. There are just some people who
Yeah.
have it, right?
And I would say this, like, do I believe that there is some collusion in our field? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there some recipe? Yeah, absolutely, right? So there's always in every system that's under pressure with a sufficiently large number, there will be bad apples. Sure. Is the entire system flawed? No.
Yeah.
Is our system particularly vulnerable or particularly impacted by fraud? I don't even think that. I think we're a reasonably nice bunch. Also, because, by the way, I don't think that our field is as pressurized as some of the other fields, just because we don't have the same standing as, say, economics or whatever. So, first, I think we are in a reasonably good spot. I'm not taking away from the bad apples.
Well,
And a lot of people have a sense of who these bad apples might be. But in general, this system, I think it is working. Most of the people that I know that are editors, they have some pretty freaking high levels of integrity and responsibility and accountability and all that sort of stuff. And nah, if there is any favors going around, I would like to be the recipient of one of them.
yeah. Well, here's the deal. So first off, there probably are. You're right. So what you and I are doing is saying this might not be as pervasive as it appears from this paper. But on the other hand, there probably are some serious problems. There probably is
Oh
some
yeah,
reciprocity. There
absolutely,
probably is some
absolutely.
collusion, and it's up to journal editors to figure that out. So this should hopefully, this little paper that they wrote that everyone's paying attention to, should hopefully be a wake up
Oh
call.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And editors, I mean, right, Supra and Sue should go look at those interactions and see if there's some rejections happening too, along with the accept. That's what I would do if I were editor in chief. I'd be like, all right, well, maybe we should look at this.
That's funny because I thought like I want to turn this into a little screening tool.
Huh.
Like just runs a little check, runs a
Hmm.
little check. If you could automate that somehow, like run a check, not
Yeah.
just as a flag or something, like be aware, to help the editors in chief to figure out potential situations they might just simply avoid. Because frankly, I can't blame them that they don't know the A types, and these are relationships they can't possibly know. Like they are very well connected, but they can't possibly know all of that.
Yeah.
They can't.
But I would literally look at my editors and I'd be like, did Recker reject anybody's paper who has accepted his? Did Nick do this? And they'll find some for me. And then maybe if there are some who don't, then maybe shouldn't be editors going forward. But I'll tell you this, in my experience too. So I think there might be collusion, there might be reciprocity that might be happening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh, it probably is. I'll tell you one place where it's not happening. Germans, they're Germans and qualitative researchers. Those are the two meanest reviewers to each other, right? It's like you get German authors and you get a German editor.
German
The
editors
German
are
editor
nasty, that's for sure. Yeah.
kills that's like
Yeah.
a whole country of just, and then same with qualitative researchers. Some argue. Now, I have heard rumors that there are some little pockets of econometric, reciprocity happening. Again, rumors. But I guarantee with qualitative work, there's none of that. Qualitative researchers
They hate
are
each other to
brutal
guts.
to each other,
Yeah,
and they will
absolutely.
reject each other, and they're just, yeah, so they're hardcore.
Yeah, I buy all of that. And I was at this kid summer school, who's by the way fantastic. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know. In some instances, I said like, look, the worst that can happen to you is that you get a young, freshly minted assistant professor to be
Reviewer,
editor
yeah,
or reviewer. Like
they'll
seriously,
kill
I'll
you.
take one of the old dudes any minute and wait a week longer because frankly, they don't care enough anymore to send you a nasty letter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's if people don't know that, the surefire way to get a paper rejected is to send it to a newly minted assistant professor. They will always kill a paper. They will kill every paper.
Because every paper can be killed. Yeah.
This is the other thing. So I want to just bring up two more conflicts of interest. One that they talked about here on page
Yeah.
13. It's kind of funny. Uh,
Oh yes.
it's like, wait, where is it? there's something about someone was on a podcast and then they accepted the paper the same year, right?
Th-
One
th- they're
editor
talking
accepted
about
the
us, I
paper.
think, right? They're talking about us. This must be
Well,
us.
yeah. So I wonder whose paper we accepted that was on the podcast. And do you
So
think you
for
and I would ever like let someone on the pod, like who cares whether they're on the
for
podcast
example,
or
they write, for example, one editor accepted a paper from a scholar who had appeared on the podcast that same year. Like, what, before or after? I don't know who that is.
well,
So
but let's just
if I
so I
don't even
assume
know, yeah, I assume it's you, first of all.
well, so first of all, you and I did a special issue on managing AI. The year
Yeah,
that came out, we
we
literally
invited
had
all of them.
every single author on our podcast. So
Absolutely.
that happened the same year. But I assume this has something to do with maybe they came on the podcast and later that year that we accepted it, or I accept maybe,
Did that ever happen? I
I don't
think
know.
we had papers on who, like people on who we knew whose work would get out that year, and they
I guess
invited them
so.
to talk about that forthcoming work.
And in another case, an editor and a senior co-author published a paper together 3 years after the paper for which potential editorial link exists. So I'll tell you this one,
Mhm.
Jason Thatcher, he we accepted. So if you remember, two
We
people
accepted a
handled each.
paper where he was a co-author, yeah, in the
Yeah,
managing
for
AI.
that MISQ special issue.
Yeah.
And then just this year, I have a paper published with him. So what? That was 2021, and this is 4 years later. So it's not 3 years,
But
but it
wait,
was
like no, wait,
accepted.
wait, wait, wait. I can become an co-author of someone whose paper I handled years
Yeah.
ago, right?
But
That
apparently they're
can't possibly
saying
be a conflict of interest.
yeah, but it said 3 years after the paper for which potential editorial link existed, due to a typical review timeline, it's unclear whether their
Oh,
collaboration began. So they're basically overseeing the senior. So one could argue that, well, I accepted Jason's paper, but then I was already collecting data for that paper I published with him. And, so one could imagine, except for it wasn't just me, it was me and Bingu. And we were the two that kind of collaborated on, well, all four of us with Radhika and you as well. But remember, we had two to kind of take the
yeah.
primary of each paper. So you'd have to implicate me with Bin and you and Radhika. And yeah, but no, I'll tell you what, I didn't, I just for your information, it wasn't, that was a pretty quick paper. It was a research note and it was an experiment. But yeah, this we did not start it before we had the paper accepted. So if
So
that's
yeah.
the one they're thinking of. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that could appear, and I could totally see that. And we should be careful about this. I don't know. What do you think? So before we finish today, huh,
Sorry, one serious question about this. So I guess what is an instance of is this notion of a perceived conflict of interest.
yeah,
Now, I want to challenge that. This was also the argument that I made at Andrew, who said, look, this could be a perceived conflict of interest. And I said, but it's not.
yeah,
There's like like this, what you described looks like a perceived conflict of interest, except that it wasn't a conflict of interest, and except that it looks like maybe you could have worked together, except that you didn't. Yeah, and I
hmm,
think there's a difference between what really happened and what it looks like.
yeah.
Yeah, and some of this is at the level of what it looks like and not what it is.
And then the question is, should we err on the side of, appearances to make sure that, we not only not don't want to have the substance of conflict of interest, we don't want the appearance. We need to be above reproach. So we can't have the appearance nor the substance of conflict of interest. If we were a big non-diverse field, like let's just say we were psychology,
Yeah.
where everybody's doing experiments, everyone has latent constructs, and where we have hundreds of thousands of senior people who I would trust in the world that could handle any particular paper, then it's like, okay, I get it. But when you're information systems, where you have technical people, you have psychological people, you have sociological people, economic people, you have every method under the sun, you have machine learning, economy, you have everything, and then you have the mix of them. You have papers now that are qualitative with machine learning that are, and it's like, all right, who do and we have only 4 to 5 thousand people. And you know as well as I do, of the 4 to 5 thousand people, I don't know, 1,000 are really, really rigorously trained. Is that if that's unfair, then I'm sorry. But I would say a quarter of our people have really rigorous training.
If
They were
that, to be
lucky like
honest.
me,
To
where
be
they
honest,
had
if
yeah,
that.
where they had Kale as their advisor, and then they actually paid attention in class. Let's say 1,000. So if you have 1,000, that immediately, and then you eliminate all of the people you co-authored with, and then you eliminate, you're getting to a very small group that can handle your paper. And I think erring on the side of absolutely no appearance of conflict of interest is just one bridge too far. I think we have to eliminate most appearances of conflict of interest. We have to trust the integrity, and we need guardrails to protect that integrity. I think the way to do that is with journal editors. I think journals need to assess what their editors are doing. And you need to be able to look at the journal and be like, this is MISQ. I know that they are doing a good job managing conflicts of interest and gauging whether people are doing some of these things. Uh, I think that's what this paper does. It brings that idea that, look, these junior people, these mid-career people are looking at it like an old boys club that is just letting each other in. And this is the evidence for why they have that perception. So we need to be able to create trust in those
Yeah.
two organizations to say, look, this is not what's happening on the inside. And if it is happening with a couple of editors, we get rid of those editors immediately.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree. I
you know,
agree on all these counts. I mean, and these are things that are happening. I mean, there could be things that could be improved. I mean, like you could be clearer about the conflict of interest definitions in the journals. It could be made more of a training thing for editors, at least for incoming editors. But I will say this: in all the situations where someone disclosed a conflict of interest, like you need to be aware of it. Otherwise, you can't do anything about it. In every single one of those, it doesn't matter whether the in conflict came from me, the associate editor, an author, review, whoever disclosed it. It was always recused. It was never not, distributed to a different person. So whenever there is something that looks like one, it is always, like in my experience, it has always been rerouted to other people. Always. I don't have a single exception from that.
I have one. I was an
You do.
associate editor in a paper that was in the third round, and one of the co-authors was a junior person who came to visit me at Georgia. And I told the senior, and the paper was already in the third round. It was happening. I think we gave it a minor revision the next round or something like that. And the senior editor and I were both. And then the junior person was there at Georgia, and I'm like, we were talking in a meeting or whatever, and I was like, oh, well, maybe we could work on that. So before I started collaborating with the person, I asked the senior editor. I'm like, listen, this person's visiting. We were talking about a collaboration. I should probably recuse myself. And he goes, no, this paper is getting published. Don't worry about it. Just help polish it up for the next two rounds and we'll get it in. And don't worry about it. There's no conflict of interest. That's
As I
what the
said,
senior editor told me. So I'm like, all right. So that's what happened, right? So
and again,
looking back,
in my view, well, it looks like one. I don't think there is,
yeah,
like, if that's what happened and there's responsible editing in the background happening and some discussion based on that disclosure, and then I can live with that. Can you
yeah.
not?
Well, I thought it was reasonable because, we, at that point, the paper was,
So I wanted to also say, like, I think the like I also don't think the absolute handling based on appearance alone, I don't think that's practical. Like we can't practice that. It's too
yeah,
small because the reality is this. Like, so you and I, with our friends, the desk rejected paper, we were now looking for a new journal to publish in. There's only so many journals that would be interested in that kind of work. I looked just this morning. I looked at the editorial boards, and I know some of the obvious conflicts of interest that exist. Look, I found of all of the journals that might be interested, I found one possibly suitable editor to handle our paper, and it wasn't even a good choice. I was like,
yeah,
oh, I don't think any of them would actually fit what we're doing here. And that's the other side of this coin. That we would have editors that don't know the papers, can't handle the paper, and would be just a bad match for that. How's that a good situation for anyone? Because the
yeah,
reality is, yes, there's 50 senior editors in my quarterly for the work that I'm doing. There's at best 5 of them, 3 of them I'm conflicted with. So there's 1 or 2 people left, you
yeah,
know? So
yeah.
that's also part of the reality.
All right. So, Wrecker, what is our rule? I'll give you Nick's rules for
All right,
conflict
give
of
me Nick's
interest is
rules.
that we need to establish institutional trust. And it's the journals that have to figure it out. It's the editors in chief have to let us know that they have some guardrails. And because our information systems field is so diverse and it's so small, uh, we can't just have err on the side of appearance and strictness, like maybe a much bigger, like an economics or psychology could do. Uh, we need these journals to monitor conflicts of interest and really take care of that. Uh, and then I think, we establish that institutional trust. I think that is the answer because I think what's happening, even if I disregard some of their analysis and say they're not accurate with what they're seeing, we know there is some happening. And we also know that a lot of people think this. a lot of people do perceive it as an old boys club where the
Yeah.
elites are just accepting each other's papers and no one else's, and it's hard to be someone that's not already among the elites, right? So we have to dispel that and create trust in the system. I think the journals have to do that. That's kind of my approach to dealing with this. What is your approach?
Well, I would add to that a topic that I've felt like that I never received or anyone else ever received is editorial training, like the stepping up into that role. And it's an important steward, gatekeeper, etc. role, and there's very little, if any, training whatsoever. There's a lot of learning by doing, and or me asking around, like, what should I be doing in these situations? So
Yeah.
I think we could do more in training of the editors, and I also think we could be tougher on the editors in terms of misconduct or any other types of ethical breaches, and then just be really tough and saying like, buddy, your time is up here. So we don't really do that either because we hush hush all these situations so that that they're not very loud to the outside anyway. So we could do a little bit of this, and then finally, author. We haven't talked about this yet. Author responsibilities. Conflict of interest is not an editor's fault. It's a relational thing, isn't it? It's between the author and the editors. Now, how many cover letters do you see where authors really faithfully and, let's say, comprehensively describe all the potential conflicts of interest? I rarely ever see that. So if you are concerned that someone handled your paper that should, well, can you help me help us? Because
Yeah.
I don't know from all your co-authors what sort of visits they've done 2 years ago, and whether how the hell am I supposed to know that you co-chaired an Higgs track with
Yeah.
Aaron Lindbergh? Like I don't
Yeah.
know these things either. So when I find an AE, probably run into COIs, and if how the hell am I supposed to know? So the authors can do their bit too. I think that would be another rule here.
Well, and maybe we add, if I send, hey, although I'm not conflicted with Jan Recker, he handled my last paper and I'm handling a paper of his, or whatever, there's
Yeah.
a potential editorial cross conflict there. And then let the editor in chief figure out, all right, do I give it to the same editor
Yeah.
or not?
And then trust that
Um,
decision. Like if there is a deliberation, like you in that SE and saying like you can start that collaboration, it's fine with me. That's good enough for me. Someone deliberated based on disclosure, made a call on the situation, good by me. Like
yeah,
that's cool. I can live with that.
yeah. All right. So we solved this problem, like every other problem we solved. We solved nothing, dude. But
No,
hopefully we gave a little perspective. And if people, and you'll put a link to
I
their
will
work.
absolutely.
They have a paper in SSRN. It's not done yet. I think their reviewers are going to beat them up a little bit on some of their inferences. But I
Yeah.
think the general idea of this paper is that they're raising awareness. There are two things they're doing. One is raising awareness of these conflict of interest that you and I, who I would argue we're generally ethical people, we probably aren't paying as much attention to as we should, and I think we
No,
should. So that's the beauty of this, is that they're drawing attention to it.
absolutely. It already worked for me. Yep.
And the other thing they're doing is maybe we can get them on next year. But the other thing they're doing is giving a perception that they're really clearly they're mid-career guys. I think there's a lot of mid-career people that are frustrated when they get rejections, and they probably don't believe that people like you and I are constantly getting rejected or something just because they see our publications, right? And they don't realize that when you're in this game for 20 years and you start building up a pile of work and you know what you're doing, those things start hitting. And then after a while, every year
Yeah.
you get a few hits, and that
Yeah.
happens. But that's decades of work. That's not a year or two of work where you get all these hits. So I think there's a perception mid-career junior that, wait a second, these senior people are just benefiting from their seniority.
And it's also blood, sweat, and tears, or how they call that. Like I sometimes tell my son, look, don't worry that I write better. It's just written like a couple of 100,000 words more than you. That's all it
Yeah,
is. It's not that
yeah,
it's because I'm older or anything. I've just typed letters on my keyboard. It's a lot more than you have. That's
yeah.
it. That's it. And I've
Yep.
seen more letters and rejections and whatnot than you just because I've done this for longer.
You know the
Sometimes there
game.
is this thing. Yeah.
You know the game better than junior people.
I need to run, give my last lecture for the summer, and
All
then
right.
I have to, pack my bags and go to France, of course, and do my
South of
chalet.
France to your villa and drink wine and your
Absolutely, and have my kids feed me grapes. I think that's what you said last time.
that's what
I
you
wonder
do.
if they do that this year.
And you know what I'm gonna do? Because I'm in America where we work.
You
I'm
write some
gonna
more
work.
papers and do
I'm
some
gonna
work.
work is what I'm gonna do, dude. Because that's
All
what we
right.
do.
Of
All right.
course you are. And then I'll see you in Denmark. I'm looking forward to this, and this will be our opening episode for the next season, live from AOM 2025.
All right, my brother.
See
You
ya.
have a great vacation. Bye.